Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Best Tips, Tricks, and Sites for Self-Briefing. This is Delia Colvin. We're going to be getting started in just about 3 minutes. But for those of you just joining us, if you could, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am going to, Jenna, if you could enter just to make sure that they should enter their Wings email address on the top. We can leave that as a sticky message, or I can do it. So, I've got some troubleshooting tips there that you should be able to see on the screen. Hopefully you can. And let's see, I'm going to do little tweaks here. I'm sure Jennifer's putting it up. Oh, there we go. I'm starting to see some Wings email. Morning, Paul. We just did some new things last night. I got some new information, and so I'm really excited to share it all with you. And we're going to get it started right on time. After you send me your Wings email address, I'd like you to do a couple of things. You're going to send me one message that has a couple of pieces of information in there. And that is what your pilot rating is, where the city and state that you fly out of, and then a yes if you've attended my webinars before, a no if you have not. So again, you're going to send me, as a matter of fact, maybe Jen, you can put that in there. What your pilot rating is, city and state that you fly out of, and then a yes if you've attended my webinars before, no if you have not. Hi, Francesco. That gives me a great idea who I'm talking to. Hi, Pat. Somebody, I just saw this check ride. Where did it go? Check ride completed 3 days ago. Yay! Jack, congratulations. Very well done. I think, didn't you send me a message that you were taking it like the next day or something? I think I did see you on one of those. Hi, Lynn. How are you? Ken, love seeing student pilots here. And let me just scan through here. I always like to say hi to everybody, but I don't always get a chance to. All right, so welcome everybody to Best Tips, Tricks, and Sites for Self-Briefing. My name is Delia Colvin. We're going to spend the next, hopefully not too much more. This is a brand new webinar, so I haven't done it and tested it out. Sometimes they go faster, sometimes they go a little bit slower. However, we should be done in about an hour and 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So a couple of troubleshooting tips. First off, if you are searching frantically for how to send a message, all you need to do is on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a yellow rectangle, or I'm sorry, a red rectangle, it's early for me, with 3 white dots. Click on that and it'll say you can send a message there. And just type it in, and then you have to press the Enter key, and that will bring that up. Let's see. The other thing is there's a reconnect button at the top of your screen. If you get disconnected for any reason, just click that. If you don't have great internet service, you might have a few difficulties. You might have to click it a couple of times. Easiest to close out any of your apps that you're using, anything that you have open other than this, and that will make it a far smoother opportunity here. Hi, Todd. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining me here on this Friday morning. We don't do Friday mornings very often. I don't do mornings very often. But, you know, we keep getting emails and people asking me to do one on mornings, and we get so many, and then I'll just go, okay, let's do a Friday morning webinar. So, so here we are. Class audience. I saw everything from CFIs to student pilots. We had somebody that just did their check ride 3 days ago. Yay! I think that was Jack. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover a lot of material. It's going to be more along the basic line of what you're looking at and why. And then notes. You're going to get some pretty good notes, I think, at the end of this webinar. I just got some new stuff added at like 2:20 this morning. So I think Jen got it all. And I almost forgot. If you have any trouble, your best troubleshooting tip is to send a little message. Somebody said that they had a gray box where they wanted to send the chat. Yes, that's exactly where you do it. It's a red button to click on it to open it if you don't have it open, and then you click and then the gray box, that's where you're going to type, and then you just press enter and we see it. Let's see. 1 second, I'm going to handle a little situation I got going here that I just discovered. There we go. All right. And Jennifer is your go-to person. You can send a message to her. She's going to be watching to make sure that you can see me all right, you can hear me all right. And if there's any problems whatsoever, she is the expert. Now, one of the things I'm going to ask you is that it's really easy to get kind of irritated when you're having sound or video trouble. I completely relate. But what I do ask is that you be really nice and treat Jen like she's your best friend. She's doing this just because she really cares about this. So please do. Wings credits. All you have to do is send us your Wings credits and be here for most of the webinar. And feedback. Your feedback is vitally important to me, especially on this one where we've got a brand new webinar. What my rule is that anything that I can do to change it, to tweak it, that makes it communicate better what you need to do or what the requirements are. If I can do that, and it's not going to tick off other pilots. In other words, if you tell me get rid of this story, add this one, and everybody else says they love that story, so I just take majority rules basically. So that's how I look at that. And so if you could take just a little bit of time at the end to do that, I sure appreciate it. So who am I? My name is Delia Colvin. I started off at Anchorage Center in 1988. I was a student over at the university studying air traffic control or aviation sciences or whatever it was. I was a Russian interpreter, so I started giving tours to pilots back then, but I worked in the weather unit. I did several other really cool things as well as working a little bit of non-radar. And then I went to Knoxville Tower and Approach, where I also worked non-radar. I discovered I was a weather nerd and I moved into flight service, and that was just a blast for me. And I was FlightWatch trained, which is a very high level of training for weather. And then I went to Washington, D.C., where I investigated accidents, incidents, and deviations. That's mostly what I did. But all along the line, I have been doing seminars, webinars. Well, the webinars we started a couple years ago. New technology. So when you hear me emphasize something, it's usually because I investigated a lot of accidents with it. So that's how that goes. You know, over the years, there has been a lot of changes in the way that we get our briefings. I actually started, I was flying back in 1980, I think it was 88. I was flying up in Alaska, and my CFI would just say, just call flight service. And I would call flight service and I felt like a total idiot and I didn't ever understand anything they said. And I would say, okay. And I was just listening for just a couple of things. And if they said those things, then I assumed that the briefing was not worthwhile, that I wasn't going to go flying. And so my goal has been to make it far easier for student pilots to get briefings, make it far easier for experienced pilots to get briefings. One of the things that happened is we got into flight service. In flight service in the olden days, we didn't have a whole lot of information. Later on, we got a lot of information, and then we transitioned to Lockheed, which really we had much better equipment. But today what's available is a world ahead of where it was even 5 years ago, a world ahead of it. And so let's talk about that. So there is this requirement. It is that each pilot in command before beginning a flight shall become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. Now, what answers that question? Because you could spend all day long gathering all information required for that. You could read the NOTAM handbook, if you wanted to. So the notice to airmen. So what does fulfill that requirement? A standard weather brief. It provides all pertinent and essential information available for a proposed flight in a set format. So it is a checklist, if you will. And one of my big concerns is that in 2004, we privatized with Lockheed, who is now Leidos. They subcontracted Leidos. And one of the things that happened is 93% of all pilots went to self-briefing. And what I've noticed is that the art of that standard weather briefing, we kind of lost. So my intention here has been to help pilots really develop their skills in getting that standard weather briefing. I recommend that you get your standard weather briefing within 2 hours of your flight time, of your proposed time. So does the National Weather Service, so does the FAA. And as a matter of fact, I've seen several accidents because pilots were getting their briefing 3 and 4 hours and the weather had dramatically changed. Just so you know, the reason when you get your briefing prior to 2 hours before your proposed flight time, what happens if it's a standard weather briefing is the briefer, if you're talking to a briefer, doesn't even have to give you the current conditions because National Weather Service considers that they're going to change so much by the time you fly, or could, that they're not even pertinent. So do make sure that you get that standard weather briefing within 2 hours of your proposed time. Now, the first thing that you're going to look at is the adverse conditions. It's going to go through TFR's NOTAMs, which are the NOTAM side of it, and then all the adverse conditions. We've got AirMets, and then we've got a whole bunch of other center weather advisories, urgent pilot reports, weather watches, convective SIGMETs. Now, the thing about that you need to know about those is that AirMets are broad strokes. We're going to talk more about that later, but almost all of those other weather phenomena, if they have any of those adverse conditions other than AirMets, you can just say you pretty much got those conditions. Synopsis. You need to know how to look at the synopsis. You need to know when you look at it, what do I got? I'm going to tell you this, the surface analysis is one of my top go-to tools. It tells me if I have a situation or not. It will tell me before whether there's anything forecast, if we're going to have turbulence, and also what kind of weather. Are we going to have convective or non-convective? Current conditions, or what's going to be moving in. Current conditions, METARs, pilot reports, radar, and satellite are all a part of the current conditions, and you should be looking at those, and you need to know what you're looking at when you look at those. We're going to talk about those later. And then you've got the forecast. En route forecast, the area forecast is now gone. For those of you that didn't know, it has been the tool that we've used for years. It was supplemented by the National Weather Service, but it was basically a model-based forecast. And they've gone now to a different model-based forecast. Remember when we had the hurricanes, they were saying the European model is saying it's going to do this, the US model is saying it's going to do this. Which one is it going to do? Well, they're all model-based, and so is which one ends up happening, right? Well, they've just got to a new one. It is not, it comes out the same. I think it comes out, the GFA, the graphical forecast for aviation, is graphical, so you're not going to have to try and decipher what they meant. The problem with the area forecast is that it was usually written for meteorologists, and so sometimes it would get a little complex. Also, remember, your graphical forecast, if you're looking at clouds, is in MSL. We're going to talk a little more about that later. Terminal forecast is the most accurate of the forecast tools. It is my favorite tool. There's a lot of information there. These guys know, and gals know, their areas very, very well. However, it does not replace the graphical forecast, the en route forecast, because it's for a spot, it's for a 5 statute mile radius. And if that forecaster is not confident that weather is going to actually affect that airport, they don't have any way of telling you what they think is going to be there. There is a way. I'm going to show you that. And then winds aloft. The winds aloft also are based on the 0012 Zulu balloon launches. And so they sometimes are not the most accurate. They're for very long periods of time. If you have a cold front moving through, those are going to change substantially, and you don't know which they're. So when you're, let's say that you're expecting to have a strong northerly wind for your route, and by the way, for those of you that don't know, we name winds for where they came from. They're like people. They bring with them characteristics. Northerly wind is going to be a cold, dry air mass. Southerly wind is going to be a warm, moist air mass generally. And so when I say when you're looking at a northerly wind and there is a frontal system that comes through, those winds are going to shift. Or something could change and those winds are shift, and it's not going to necessarily be reflected in those winds aloft. And then NOTAMs. We're not going to talk too much about NOTAMs today. NOTAMs have their own individual complexities, but we are going to talk about the weather. That is mostly my area of expertise. So the question is, is the briefing that I'm getting legal if I get all those things answered? So let's talk about this. Hang on just a second here. And one of these points does not fulfill the requirements of a legal brief. And we're going to talk more about that. There's actually no such thing as a legal brief, but which of these is not going to fulfill the requirement of a standard weather brief, or is not going to be what we have coined the term legal brief? All right. A lot of you still looking at this. I'm going to give you just a minute longer. All right. Well, that was and the fact is that aviationweather.gov briefing is not what we call a legal brief. Now, let me go into the details, because the fact is that there is no such thing as a legal brief. Back in the olden days, back before 2004, we had two options. You called flight service to get a legal brief, or you had a dispatcher. And now they have, once we privatized and Lockheed Martin moved in there, they allowed briefers to go to their own sites. And now they're saying, I spoke to the head of the flight service program last year, and she said there's no such thing as a legal brief. However, if you go out flying and you have an accident, an incident, or a deviation, we're going to look to see, and I say we roughly because I was part of them a long time ago, 5 years ago. They're going to look to see where you got your briefing, where you got your information from. And if there's no record of it, they're going to assume you didn't. So what you want to do is you want to have a briefing on record. Now, you can call flight service. Flight service is a very viable option, and I believe that they're ramping down and going to be reducing their personnel quite a bit. I'll tell you why in a little bit. So most of those options are going to be online, because 93% of you are going online. But you have to know what you're looking at, right? And you have to follow that checklist so that you're getting all the information that's required of a standard weather brief. Now, which one is wrong? Flightplan.com is actually, it's one of the accepted forms. It actually will record every page that you looked at and keep a record of it, how long you looked at those pages. And Garmin Pilot is also, as I understand it, the ones that I do are DUATS and 1-800-Weather Brief, as well as a few others. Aviationweather.gov is not actually a recorded briefing. In other words, it's not recording what you do there. So there you go. That was the trick question there. So we have a number of government-funded. Those are 1-800-Weather Brief, DUATS, and one other, which I'll come back to in a second. Now, let's take a look at DUATS. Here is DUATS. If you go into DUATS, you go to Weather Brief, go to Standard Weather Brief, and Low Altitude Briefings. There are some graphics here I'm going to bring up my little pen so I can draw. So you're going to follow. Why is my white bar not drawing? Hang on a second here. So right here, you've got a lot of information about how you're going to get that. And then you've got some pretty nice graphics. However, once you get into the briefing section, I'm not terribly excited about it. You're going to have to really know how to read it. It's just going to give you the data. And you'll notice that up at the top, it goes through all of them, but it does not have the en route forecast. It's missing some of the elements of a standard weather briefing. And all you're going to do is you're going to get a printout of the weather. The toughest thing that we as briefers did was to take a massive information and hone it down so that it affected only you during your route. And sometimes you guys get irritated with this because we give you a piece and you say, that's not on my route. And yeah, rightfully so. But as our areas got better, we had a little tougher time sometimes deciphering that, or we had so many briefings and suddenly we got one in a new area and we were trying to do that. I think it's really vital that pilots be able to do their standard weather briefs in 5 minutes or less, 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to talk about some ways that you're going to do that. So here is Do Us, where there's a lot of information. Here is, let's see here, I think this one, sorry, it's cutting off the top of my. Here is Garmin Pilot. There's several things in there. However, one of the things that I don't see either on Garmin Pilot, it's got some great graphics for en route flights. However, it does not have the great checklist for a standard weather brief unless I'm just looking at the wrong area. Flightplan.com, again, there's a lot of information here, but where is that checklist for that standard weather brief? And ForeFlight. ForeFlight's one of my favorite tools. It does actually have a checklist, but it is not in alignment with that standard weather brief. So, as I said earlier, I think it's vital that you be able to go through all of the elements of a standard weather brief and do it in 5 to 10 minutes, which means that you have to be able to eliminate the stuff that's not specifically on your route and information that doesn't apply to the time that you're flying. So that is what I see as a problem for most of these. The weather briefer obviously will do that for you. However, there is one that will do all of these for you, and that is 1-800-weatherbrief.com. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Now, another little poll here. Actually, I don't think I put this one on here. Nope, that's the one. All right, so here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover my favorite sites for a standard weather brief, which is 1-800-weatherbrief.com, as well as several other sites that we're going to that you're going to integrate with that. Unfortunately, because there's been some changes, you can't. 1-800-weatherbrief is no longer just a simple go-to, at least in my opinion. I'm going to talk about some other great sites, 10 top tips to a better briefing, then we'll wrap it all up with a Q&A. Oh, here we go. So, which site do you go to for your briefings? And what's really interesting here is that maybe even like 6 months ago, I would get like only 1 or 2 people that had ever been on 1-800-weatherbrief.com. ForeFlight dominated, and people usually used a combination of calling a briefer and online sites. Sorry, I'm going to sip my coffee. All right. And you can see right now, ForeFlight and 1-800-weatherbrief.com are neck and neck As a matter of fact, 1-800-WeatherBrief.com is starting to eke above that, and I think it's worthwhile. It's free, you know. ForeFlight I do think is a phenomenal tool, but rest of you are using some other things. Now, there is another thing in here. We talked about the standard weather brief that you want to get within 2 hours. You also want to get an update brief. An update brief you're going to get right before you do your run-up. And if you're calling flight service, you'll just say, I need an update brief. It's part of the abbreviated brief. And all I need is the changes since I got my standard weather brief, which was at, and then give them the time. They may already know that. And then they'll just give you the changes. Now, if you self-briefed and you skipped over that presidential TFR, then guess what? You're not going to get the presidential TFR. They're smart. They'll probably mention it anyway. But also, you can send yourself an electronic update brief, and I'm going to show you how to do that. You can scan through the graphics. You can scan through the text, and it will be very, very quick. I recommend that you do this within 30 minutes of your flight time. It's going to tell you if you got a problem there. Now then, I like to go through the overview. There's parts of the standard weather briefing that I do before the others. Mine are satellite, radar, and surface analysis. One of the old timers with the National Weather Service, he said he always does that. It just gives him a big picture of what's going on, and then he can hone in and look at the smaller events, and they have more meaning. Because if you look at some of the stuff and you haven't looked at the satellite, radar, and surface analysis, you're not always sure what you're looking at. But if you look at those first, you have an idea exactly what you're looking at. So in the satellite, I like to look at the visible. We're going to take a look more at the visible. And you can take a look at that. I'm going to actually show you in just a minute where I go to do that. When you're looking at the satellite, you're looking at what kind of clouds, where are they moving to, which means you have to animate it. Are they convective? Are they non-convective? Are they moving onto my route? Is there fog forming? Are those thunderstorms that are developing? You gotta know all that stuff. You'll also be able to see frontal system pretty clearly. And if it's night, you'll be able to see the. This satellite right here is a color enhanced IR, infrared. In other words, it's picking up the temperatures of the clouds. So it's not telling you. But you should still be able to see. You can see that these clouds over here are very thick. These ones right here along the right-hand edge, that is actually a frontal system. And then on radar, we're going to talk about what you're looking at. And radar, I don't even pay any attention to unless it's backed by satellite, because radar is not terribly reliable. It can do a lot of things. It can hide massive cells in the center. It can, where it's showing light precipitation, it can also, if you're looking at like this, a mosaic, it can show a large area, and it's actually so large that it's not showing where their cells are developing, or it's delayed. A mosaic like this can actually be delayed up to 20 minutes. So when you're in your cockpit and you're looking at the data link radar, that can have a 20-minute delay, and a cell can go through its entire life cycle in 30 minutes. Can do that. So if you're 20 minutes late, you could be flying right into a nasty cell. And then I look at the surface analysis. Surface analysis tells me where there's instability, where there's not, where there's frontal system, and also where there is turbulence. Now, one of the things that I do, I don't just say, are the isobars close together? I look at what's that system moving over? Is it moving over mountains? How are the mountains in the area being fed with winds? So this is, I actually got this satellite from 1-800-WeatherBrief.com under their weather. And I clicked on the satellite and enlarged it. Now, you do want to animate it, but you can go to this photo itself will be available on aviationweather.gov. My two favorite sites, the ones that I mostly spend most of my time on, aviationweather.gov, I never used to send pilots there because it was so complex. There was, it was really a site designed for meteorologists or for weather briefers. Now they're becoming very user-friendly. There's a lot of places on there, and I basically go between aviationweather.gov and 1-800-weatherbrief.com. And I'll tell you about that later. Now, there's two kinds of clouds you want to look at when you're looking at the visible. This right here is stratiform. It is sheet light. It's going to move in like a sheet. And you can see it's moving around the mountains here. You can see the mountains are poking out right there. You can see the mountains poking out right there, right there. And so that's what they're doing. They're moving in like a sheet. Now, if you know the tops of those mountains, you know what the tops of those clouds are. You can also see it moving through this mountain pass here and this one here. Now, this mountain pass right here happens to be like 4,300 feet, I think it is. And the southern one is only about 3,200 feet. So we know that the clouds are thicker up here than they are right there. Main hazards with stratiform are going to be, number one, low ceilings or IFR conditions, reduced visibilities, mountain obscuration, and occasionally icing, not usually in California though. Now, the other kind of clouds that you're going to look for are stratiform. Stratiform are going to give you kind of a billowy look. You're going to see contouring and shadows. See these shadows in here? That's a shadow from a cumulus. That looks like a cotton field there. That's one of the ways to identify developing thunderstorms. And so main hazards with that are going to be all of that weather hazards and all the weather hazards in aviation and some. You also have threat of, you've got microbursts as well, ups and down drafts, more severe icing. You'll also have hail and lightning strikes. Now, you can get the hail and lightning strikes from 25 miles away. The winds can affect you up to that far. So you want to stay at least 25 miles away from them. And if you were flying between two and you've got 25 miles between each one of them, guess what? They're growing. And you can end up very rapidly with not 25 miles. As a matter of fact, what they do is they put off heat into the upper atmosphere, which is what causes new baby thunderstorms to form. So they can be forming very, very rapidly, and you can get yourself in a heck of a lot of trouble with that. So use caution. Now you can see that this is that frontal system, that is a frontal system, is actually creating cumulus down in that portion of the route over the stratiform, the coastal stratus in Los Angeles. You can see that, right? You can see the shadowing and contouring. So this is a little convective here. Now up here we have a pattern that we call a dendritic pattern. Dendritic means tree or branch-like, and that's because it looks like a tree or branch. It generally represents snow on the tops of mountains, as in this case, or valley fog. You can maybe you can see this. There's a little valley fog there, right? Now, normally I would say that this is snow. However, we've got a lot of convective activity in California. And if you know the area that you're flying in, which you should, you would know that in California, unless we have an upper level trough at the 500 millibar level, we're not going to see convective activity. And our coastal stratus is showing us that we have some. Now, I'm not going to jump over everybody's head here when I'm talking about the 500 millibar chart. I don't want to do that because we've got a lot of students and low-time pilots. However, in California, that is one of your go-to sheets. If you're anyplace else in the country, that is not necessarily the case. However, in California, southern half of California, south of Monterey Bay, you've got to look at that 500 millibar chart. And if there is a low pressure system or a trough, which is an extended area of low pressure, you're going to have convective activity. So right here, when you look at this, you can actually see that there is some white billowy little things here, and actually that looks like some convective activity there. This right here looks like a forest fire to me, probably smoke billowing, and the smoke's moving that way, as is the wind, which is pretty standard. Now here's aviationweather.gov. You can go in here, and if you scroll down lower, it'll let you select the area. One of the things I want to point out here is this right here. And if you animate it, this continued to stay there. That looks like haze that we see in the summer. It is actually smoke from the fires. That's what that is. We rarely see that in the Western. We generally see it down here and in like August, and it's usually orangish in color. Here you see a lot that looks like that billowy stuff that we were talking about. That's all convective. So something convective is going on there, right? And I also see something going on. Looks like there's some convective activity right there. So we'll take a little more of a look of it. Make sure that you do animate it. You're going to have to scroll down to the bottom to animate it and narrow it out. So we wanted to take a little closer look at what was happening there. Again, you can see these thunderstorms very clearly here, developing thunderstorms. That is a convective line or an area. A lot of convection. Here's some also. But here is a lot of stuff going on. That does not look very clear in what we're looking at. It doesn't look like clouds to me. My guess is, if I were to guess, I would guess smoke. And actually, I happen to know it's smoke, but that's what I would also guess because it doesn't look solid enough on the visible to be clouds, and yet doesn't look thin enough to be other kinds of clouds. Now here you see something right here that you really need to recognize. This right here is mountain wave. You see how you've got the lines there? It goes into, mountain wave goes into rolls where you're getting rolls of, and these are your rotor clouds. Now those clouds can be at any altitude. And what they do is they indicate that you do have mountain wave there. You do have mountain wave there. What altitude are those clouds at? We don't know. What altitude are you going to have the mountain wave at? Could be all the way down to the surface, could be up to 50,000. Does that mean you don't have mountain wave here? No, it does not. All that means is that the temperature dew point spread came together while in one of the rolls, whether it was at 10,000 feet, 14,000 feet, or at 7,000 feet, and it's actually forming into clouds that you can see. So that's what you do know there. Now you see a really interesting thing here. There's mountain wave there. There's also, you rarely see mountain wave running right along from north to south here. And remember, you have got to animate it, loop it. You can stop it and slow it down and do whatever you need, but do make sure. And here you see that it's giving you the visible right there type. Now, one of my favorite sites for thunderstorms and for looking at radar is IntelliCast. It does a number of cool things. One of the really cool things it does is under National, you can click on that and go down to Mixed, and you can get that satellite radar and surface analysis all on one chart. You just go down to National and Mixed, but that's not what we're talking about. Right now, we're going to look at the radar. Now, if you see any threat of thunderstorms, you can click on that and you can go to their radar summary. I think their radar summary is the best in the business. Let me put this in a color you can see probably better. Their summary. So go to that, and it just brings up a great picture. What it's going to do is it's going to tell you what the tops are of the convective activity and also the direction the cells are moving, not the system, but the cells. The cells can be moving up to the north, and the frontal system can be moving rapidly to the east. So you've got to know where that system is moving to also. But it's going to give you some very accurate, very nice information. And I think that's WSI graphics, which are my favorite. Here you can see it a little bit better. It's saying the tops of the precipitation, not the tops of the clouds, are at 20,000, and it's moving to the west at 19 knots right there. And then you've got the aviationweather.gov radar. I usually take a peek at this if I'm doing my, and you can just go to observations. It's under observations, and then you'll get current radar, and it'll show what's going on. You do want to make sure and animate it. And if you see any indication via satellite or on radar, you want to make sure and go to that single site radar, because the mosaics, what happens is the mosaics are created by a separate resource. So you've got the National Weather Service, and they have all these sites that are scanning, and they scan it 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes for it to make its whole circle. If there's no weather there, it's clearer mode. And then if it's scanning and it's picking up some clouds, it'll slow down to like 7 to 10 minutes. And if it is looking for the highest level of precipitation, because it looks like there may be something convective, it can take 15 minutes to do that circulation. So these sites that create the mosaics will do a scan. The weather goes to them, they create their mosaic, and then they put their timestamp on it. So again, it can be missing information because that site hasn't come back and reported yet. It can be doing the several other scans, and severe weather that you're looking at isn't on that. So don't count that as your end all. Use your satellite and then use that radar to back it up. So let's go and take a look at the single site radar. The single site radar is going to be the thing that you're going to look at. Here, if we're looking at a flight in Northern California, we're going to take a look and scan down and select composite reflectivity, which is, by the way, now what your data link is showing. Because the main thing that you want to know is the highest level of precipitation. You want to know what you're going to get, except for crop dusters. I know crop dusters that just want to know what's hitting the ground. But the composite is going to tell you really what kind of system you've got there. And you can stop it and you can back it up if you think you see something. And then you can always go back. Now here is a single site radar, and it is scanning, and most of this around here is ground clutter. Sometimes you'll see the cars moving in there, as a matter of fact. Now if you see what looks like cells in here, and they do not move, they're probably mountaintops. And you can take a look also on your satellite to confirm that. Next is the surface analysis. Now, one of the things to recognize is we've got this low right here over Las Vegas. It's there almost all summer. And what happens is it's very hot location. And it actually develops into a low pressure system because of the heat, and it starts spinning. Here you've got mountains, you've got the Sea of Cortez, which is warm, moist air, and if that low is circulation, you got to know which way these frontal systems circulate. As it goes up here, it goes up to the Mile High City Prescott, and that's why you're seeing all of these thunderstorms around here, despite that high pressure system there. This is a dry slot. You don't usually see those east of the Mississippi, but when that means it's so dry that what happens is it ends up with a line that usually forms with thunderstorms that's attached to it. So that's what it's letting you know. This is a thermal trough right there, and that is a thermal trough. There's more thermal troughs than I think I've ever seen plotted here on this one. So here is 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF. Again, 1-800-WEATHERBRIEF.com is my favorite site to get your standard weather brief for a number of reasons. First off, earlier I talked about being able to get your weather and analyze it in 5 to 10 minutes. I think that's of vital importance to you. So, because if you don't, you're going to skip around on elements, right? So, 1-800-WEATHERBRIEF.com, in conjunction with ForeFlight, developed a thing called a next-gen briefing. And you can see it right here. And so you can click, when you go to 1-800-WEATHERBRIEF.com, you can look at the featured capabilities, and they've got a whole lot of them that are really great. One of them is text to activate, text to close VFR flight plans. I think that one's a lifesaver. You should be doing that. If you're flying VFR, you should file a VFR flight plan to your destination. Text while you're on the ramp. Text when to close it and it'll also send you close reminders via text or email. They've also got surveillance, enhanced search and rescue, which I also think is a phenomenal tool. You have to buy a piece of equipment, but it's going to contribute. I think I saw 3 lives saved my last year in flight service because we were able to find them very quickly. There's a whole set of all kinds of phenomenal feature capabilities. You should go in there and read those. Also, there is videos that will tell you exactly what they're doing. Now, there is this area right here. FAA welcomes your feedback. Now, you're going to see this lots of places, but one of the things that's unique about this is that right now they've posted a really interesting notification, and I'm so glad they do that, because before it was like the FAA posted these and pilots weren't seeing it. So now they're linking it up with duos1800weatherbrief.com, so you can see it there. One of the things that they're doing is they have proposed to take down 644 RCOs. What is an RCO? Remote Communications Outlet. That's how you talk to flight service from the sky if you need help at all. So my concern is, they're taking down 644 RCOs, which probably means flight service is ramping down. If you have any thoughts on that, then I would make a comment and let the FAA know what you'd like to do with that. You do have a voice, and they are listening to you, but they do have to cut back expenses, and so you can help them by helping them identify what is vital and what is not. Over here in the southern portion of this is you're going to find, you're going to get actually just right below this is a place where they have videos. They're very short how-to videos on how to use 1-800-weatherbrief.com. Over here is weather. Any of the stuff here that you click on is going to take you to aviationweather.gov. And for your legal briefing, you're going to click on here. You've got to fill out your flight plan information and click enter. We're going to look at that in just a moment. Now, as I said, the thing that the greatest reason that I like this is that of all the other sites that I showed you, none of them gave you a very clean checklist of all the items you need to look at when you're looking at your standard weather brief, because every piece, every element of that piece is going to give you a bigger picture and help you put together a very clear concept of what you're looking at. This is what comes up when you click standard weather brief on 1-800-weatherbrief.com. And as you'll notice, it's got adverse conditions, synopsis, current weather, forecast, and NOTAMs. That is your standard weather brief. And let's see here, I think I've got it blown up here. So again, adverse conditions, synopsis, current weather, forecast, and NOTAMs. And it's breaking those down as you click on those. Right here, it's got plain text. Now, some of you send me messages and say, why haven't the FAA gone to plain text? We have the technology, it should be there. And here's why. I do understand your consideration. However, when you go to coded, it just becomes so much clearer, but we're going to talk about that when we get to the current conditions. In any case, my consideration and my recommendation is that you do not get locked onto using that plain text as a tool or as a crutch. Use it as a tool, not as a crutch. If you don't know what something means, look it up. Click on plain text, read it, and then unclick it. I'm going to show you why later. Next Gen Briefing. Select this Next Gen Briefing and bring it up. It is going to, what it does is, remember I told you that a briefer, the biggest challenge that we had was figuring out what's going to affect you during your flight, on your flight. That Next Gen Briefing is actually going to do that. And ForeFlight makes that available, as does 1-800-weatherbrief.com. ForeFlight doesn't have the great checklist like for a standard weather briefing, but it does. I think it does a better job of it. ForeFlight, however, has greater advantages in some other things that we'll talk about also. I think ForeFlight is a phenomenal tool, just in case anybody's wondering. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Most of the other sites I recommend for other things other than your standard weather brief. Because once you have a clear picture, then you can look at other things and it's going to give you a better picture. So when you click on adverse conditions, you're going to get a drop-down menu. It's going to say TFRs, closed unsafe NOTAMs. That is the NOTAM portion that we talked about. And then it's got convective SIGMATs. Now here you'll notice there is a 0. There's no convective SIGMATs. There's no SIGMATs. There are AirMats. It's got the orange ball, but sometimes it won't. Urgent pilot reports. Now, one of the things you have to know about urgent pilot reports is that the deal with urgent pilot reports, we've got severe weather, and so what will happen is that briefer, just a moment here. Sorry about that, had to sneeze. That air traffic controller flight service will go to them, or the National Weather Service will go and say, you know, we think we're getting icing, we think we're getting severe turbulence in this area. If you could get us some urgent pilot reports, or get us some pilot reports. So they'll come back and they'll say, okay, I got this pilot report. Oh, I got another one. And they'll give us like 5 of them at a time. We'll get them all entered into the system. And guess what? Pilot reports only stay in the system for like 45 minutes. So then they drop out of the system and it will show a 0 there, but there are actually some there. This will actually continue, urgent pilot reports, this little link here will continue showing them plotted on there for long after that. So you can see if there were any urgent pilot reports reported early. And any of these others, anything other than AirMat, if they say that there's something there, you got the weather. So here we've got AirMats, we've got the next drop-down menu, which is telling us all of the adverse conditions. Notice it does not say 0 next to IFR or mountain obscuration. However, the orange ball is not there. However, it's saying 0 on icing. Freezing level, you're always going to have a freezing level. And that's saying 0 for the rest of these. So that's your checklist. Now, one other thing I want to point out is that it's got this right here, this red dot with the white exclamation mark. It says the AirMat is active while flight, estimated traverse area between these times. But, and you can read what it says. Also, if you see a black arrow, that means there's another one that's also going to be active on your route. Then you can go and take that notice and look on this map. Now, this terrain and color map is my favorite. You can zoom in and zoom out. You can actually also move around with it. But here you can see it's plotting the time that that's going to affect you. It's affecting you along your entire route. And they're forecasting mountain obscuration right here. But guess what? We're flying through the valley. So mountains, unless we deviate, are not going to be a factor for us. However, IFR conditions were. So let's say that you're looking at this and you go, man, there's some weather there, but it's kind of looking odd. You know, we don't have IFR conditions, but on satellite we saw something. They are forecasting mountain obscuration, which tells us those mountains are, I think the coastal range there is about 4,000 feet. It could be lower. But that tells me that there's going to be cloud layers in there, but there's something else going on. Now, if you wanted to right there jump in and call 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF, or let's say that they had an AirMat for turbulence, but there's something going on or a system that looks like it may be moving in the area, I would just jump on the phone and call 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF. For you student pilots, low-time pilots, you should be using 1-800-WEATHERBRIEF.com and then supplement that with calling a briefer until you see what they're doing and you know that you're able to do that yourself. And you should be able to do that pretty quickly. The other thing that you can do is send yourself a copy of that briefing and then take that briefing and go talk to your CFI about it. That will raise your level of understanding of weather very significantly. And one of the things that I haven't said is that weather is the leading cause of aircraft accidents. So you got to know what you're looking at. Now, when you do call flight service, the first thing that you're going to do is be the pilot in command, even if you're a student pilot. You're going to get the name and initials. Hi, this is Delia. Who am I speaking to? And they may give you initials. This is Delta Charlie. Or they may just say, my name is, Delia. Or they may answer the phone. Hi, I'm Delia. Can I help you? That's what I usually did. And then you're going to just go through the briefing. And if they're talking too fast, you're going to control that briefing. That's part of being the pilot in command. One of the things that happened, I left flight service for a while. And when I came back, we had all these new young guys that were so enthusiastic. They just got done with school. They were out of college. They were all certified pilots. Really sharp group. This was Lockheed Martin. And I would listen to them brief, and they would be so abrupt and so rude. And the one day I had the opportunity. I said, you guys are so nice. Why are you so rude with the pilots? And across the board, all of them said, we're rude. And I said, oh yeah, you're rude. And they said, really, we don't want to be rude. And what had happened is they thought that's the way flight service was supposed to happen. And I said, now, when you were going through your pilot training, did you like being talked to like that? And they said, oh no. As a matter of fact, it scared the, blood out of us, just the idea of calling flight service. So we didn't. They had to call during their check ride, and that was the only time. But they were really afraid because they thought people were going to bite off their heads and talk over them. And we clarified that it was called flight service for a reason. And immediately there was a change in everything. And we started getting a lot of compliments at Oakland Flight Service right before they shut us down. So, so my point is that, but those guys moved on, and they actually, most of them went on to Prescott, and they're still brief in that area, and they're really fantastic. So my point is that you, the pilot, if any of you had come back and said, can you slow it down, or I can't quite understand what you're talking about, or what does this mean? They would have done that. One of my big lessons in that, right about that time, I got a call from this female pilot. She knew what she was talking about, and she was so good in listening and stopping and controlling the briefing. But then she started asking me questions, and I realized this was her first time calling flight service. She asked me what a ridge was and why she was going to have haze because of the ridge. And so I went in and I explained it to her very quickly. She asked me a couple of other questions. When we got to the end of the briefing, discovered she had probably the best CFI she could possibly have. Her husband, who was is the great General Chuck Yeager. And he actually got on the phone and talked to me. He is my hero. I used to read his book like every 6 months, so I was a little starstruck. And at the end, they actually invited me up to dinner. So I got to ask him a lot of questions. But one of the things that I really wanted to know is he prepped his wife so well. And the thing he prepped her to be was a pilot in command. And the other thing that he did is he had her asking any questions. One of the things you know about General Chuck Yeager is the reason he survived. He says it was just the luck of the draw, perhaps. I think it's more that he didn't let anybody talk over him. He found out when somebody said something and he didn't know what it meant. I saw it with his wife. She didn't hesitate to ask me if she didn't understand something. So that's being the pilot in command. It doesn't mean being rude. It doesn't mean being snippy. It means being in communication with that briefer when you're doing that. Or if you're going online and you're looking at your tools and you don't understand something it says, look it up. That's being the pilot in command. Don't place that briefer on mute. As soon as you do that, we assume that we are talking, we're talking to the hand, basically. We believe as soon as you put us on mute that you're not listening anymore. And that's because most of the time we'll ask a question, nobody answers back. Be attentive, ask questions. Get that briefing done, and you can have it done in 5 to 10 minutes. It's going to take you longer when you first start. So let's take a look at a route from Portland, Oregon, and how the tools that I'm going to use in here. I'm going to use a couple of them. So here we've got a standard weather briefing. It's saying that we have some weather, and that weather is a TFR. We've got a TFR that's in there. Now, one of the things that I'm going to recommend with TFRs is rather than reading all of this text, rather than reading all of that, what I would do is I would look at this number and look to see where it is plotted and make sure that is the same number. Now, sometimes you'll suddenly look and then it'll say like 5617. What does that mean? That TFR has been updated. But look at that on your standard weather brief. And as you go through, you're going to find all kinds of weather in here. It's going to give you exactly what's going on. One of the things to know, again, is that anytime you've got air mats, those are broad strokes. They have to be affecting 3,000 square miles, and they have to be affecting over 50% of the area. So sometimes we have the weather and we don't have the air mat. Sometimes we have the air mat and we don't have the weather. You've got to decide based on what you're looking at whether those conditions are actually there or not. Now, we just looked at IFR conditions. Again, I have seen a third of Kentucky with low IFR conditions and no air met. Sometimes, and it just did not meet the qualification. So you've got to look at all of that standard weather briefing. A lot of things, one of the things that only a briefer will say is VFR flight not recommended. And for those of you wondering, they will not say VFR flight recommended. They will not say IFR flight not recommended. Believe me, I got in trouble. National Weather Service, FAA did not like it. So VFR flight not recommended is a phrase. Why is that an important phrase? Because 63% of all weather-related fatalities are due to pilots flying into IFR conditions. 63%. So what they added to a standard weather briefing when you're talking to a briefer is the briefer's judgment of whether you're going to have any of those problems. So that briefer is going to add their judgment to that call. And sometimes they haven't had enough opportunity to evaluate it. You've got to know what their judgment is. Is it that they just they've been briefing in the southeastern portion of the country all day and suddenly they got a call up in Idaho and there is an air met for IFR but no weather that supports it? You got to know what it is. And so that's where you ask. Anytime you hear a VFR flight not recommended, you've got to discern whether that is a CYA, that they're saying that just because there's an air met and no weather to support it, or whether they're actually giving you weather that they have looked at and analyzed. So the answer is, for you student pilots and low-time pilots, you should say, thank you, I understand. Can you continue with the briefing? And you should continue going through the briefing. And at the end of the briefing, you'll make it, even if you're experienced, you should let the briefer know what your intent, because I'll tell you, most of the time we wonder, did you hear this? And do you know this? And what do you want me to do from here? Now, one thing to keep in mind is that this recommendation is advisory in nature. That briefer is not telling you you can go or can't go. They are going to notate that they said VFR flight not recommended because they're required to, by the FAA, to use their judgment and tell you if VFR flight is not recommended. Now, some pilots will tell me, briefers say this all the time, only if you're living in Washington or up in the Great Lakes do they probably say it most of the time. They can't say it all the time. They can only say it when there's weather supporting it. They'll get canned as fast or time on the beach just as fast for saying it when there's nothing there as they will for not saying it when it's required. So you are the final decision maker on all of that. You are the final decision maker. Please do make good, safe decisions. And one of the things that is completely all right is getting to the end of the briefing or even at that phase and saying, you know, I'm IFR. And they can say, oh, okay. And they'll just go on with the briefing. Or they'll say, or you could say, you know, you said VFR flight not recommended, but it doesn't really look like we're getting any weather. The currents in the forecast are all reflecting great conditions. And then they may say, yeah, you're right, it was a CYA, or they may come back and they may say, yes, however, it looks like this system to the north is moving a little further. Whatever they do say, I say VFR flight not recommended when there's sometimes not anything that a pilot is going to pick up, because I know my areas very, very well. So, and I oftentimes won't say it even when there's an air met for IFR. So there you go. You got to know what it means. Now, the thing about AirMet Tango as well as AirMet Zulu is that they do not include anything that's happening with convective. Icing that you're going to get because of convective activity or convective turbulence, it's not going to tell you. So if you're flying below convective clouds and you're getting knocked around a bit and there was no AirMet Tango, that's why. Also, AirMets are mostly large scale, especially in turbulence. So the places that I see the most potential for severe turbulence oftentimes are not reflected on here in any way, because to go to the Center Weather Advisory SIGMET stage, it's going to actually they're going to actually have to see that adverse conditions, and oftentimes they'll wait and see. Sometimes what we get is we get a high pressure system over the Great Basin, and if the circulation even touches the Palm Desert, Here's the high. If the circulation even touches a palm desert, I know that we're going to get and it's at 10 to 20 knots. I know that we're going to get 80 to 100 knots in San Bernardino, and we're going to have severe turbulence. So, and there won't be anything issued for it. I'm just watching for it. It's the start of the Santa Ana conditions that we get there, and I will just start telling pilots, you got a chance of getting some turbulence. Most briefers won't do that, so you're going to have to keep an eye out for those conditions. There's all kinds of conditions. If you see circulation around, that's why you're looking at that surface analysis. It also does not usually forecast mountain wave or mechanical turbulence. So those things are typically not included in any of those. Here again is mountain wave, but there's also something else here. And that is these horizontal lines are called cloud streets. Those are thermals that are rising. So the glider pilots love them. However, they are indicators of severe turbulence. And here you can see they're actually breaking up the rotor clouds. So if I saw those, I probably wouldn't want to be flying. Now, there's really like east of the Appalachian Range, you don't typically see them that well formed unless you're up in Washington or Oregon. Down in southern half of California, you don't typically. So what do I use for turbulence? How are you going to determine if you have turbulence? You're going to use my very, very favorite site. And by the way, this should be added to your standard weather brief checklist, is checking the VAD winds. As a matter of fact, you should check them right before you fly. I would compare them with what's going on with the winds aloft and also with the surface winds. What are the VAD winds? VAD stands for velocity azimuth display. Velocity meaning speed, azimuth meaning horizontal direction. What are the winds doing? What are they actually doing? It's one of the most up-to-date reports you're going to get, and it is one of the best you can get for turbulence. It is plotted at every Doppler radar site across the country and update with every scan of the radar every 7 to 10 minutes. So it's a very worthwhile thing for you to add. Here is where I recommend. There's a couple of places you can get it. The best of the best of the best is at pilotsandweather.com/Sierra Sierra Romeo. You're going to get this in your notes, so don't. Sierra Sierra Romeo single site radar. .html. Now, when you get there, you're going to see a single site radar. You have to scroll down to the bottom to get it. And up in the upper right-hand corner, there is a little thing that says up here, radar sites. And it'll bring up a graphical map, and you'll select where you're looking at. Now, what it will do is it will measure from the first 1,000 feet above the field elevation all the way up to 50,000 feet, which is what it's doing right here. Now, here's where you're seeing very strong winds, if you know how to read these wind barbs. They're pointing in the direction the wind is blowing. Let me clear this out again. They're blowing in the direction the wind is blowing, and you can see the long spikes are 10 knots, the short one is 5, so this is 45 knots. The triangle is 50, by the way. This is Atlanta, and this is during Hurricane Irma, if it was still a hurricane then. Now, what's really interesting is that at 2,000 feet, we have 45 knots, and at 1,000 feet, we have nothing. Now, Georgia's pretty flat. However, this radar site is sitting at 1,029 feet. ND means no data, nothing detected. You could suspect that there was no wind there. However, you'd be wrong. What would happen is some of the sites will accidentally put ND, low altitude, instead of eliminating that. For instance, if you had a site that didn't surface elevation was at 2,500 feet, you might see ND for 1,000 and 2,000. You have to look at what the elevation is of that radar site. Now then, green to blue barbs mean it's fairly reliable. There is no reason for them to question it. Yellow to red means not reliable. Usually you'll see that for the 3 Bs, bugs, bats, and birds. And they're flying in an opposite direction from the wind. Here is your time. The most recent is over on the right-hand side. And you can check for the last hour to see if you had any like little eddies, like swirls of winds that you'll see almost like that. They'll just look like eddies, as a matter of fact. Airmet Zulu. Now you can look at this, but remember it's not considering convective icing, but my go-to tool is just to look. Am I going to be flying, especially if you're VFR, am I going to be flying in clouds? Am I going to be flying in rain or drizzle? And am I going to be flying between the temperatures of 0 to -10 Celsius? If you are, you got a chance of icing regardless of what's going on with that Airmet for icing. And remember, it's not going to calculate convective icing. So the danger with convective icing is that you in a developing thunderstorm, you get the cells circulating from the base all the way to the top very rapidly. They get very large, and you end up with a thing called supercooled large droplets that accumulate very rapidly and can bring down a plane. Now then, here is where it is showing that you've got a chance of trace to moderate icing. By the way, Great Lakes area is the best. Oh, this is a great site. This is on aviationweather.gov. The supplementary icing information, CIP, current icing potential, FIT, FIP, forecast icing potential. Here you're going to set your time and date and your altitude. And it's going to tell you what your icing potential is. People that fly in the Great Lakes, that some of the worst icing conditions in the world, swear by this. However, use common sense. Even if it's not forecasting icing at your level, if you're going to be in precipitation and you're going to be below the freezing level, you got a chance of icing. That red hashtag meant super cold large droplets, by the way. Then you're going to look at the current conditions. Now, in the current conditions, learn the language of ICAO, which is this is it, right? That is the language of standard weather briefing. So from here to here is where most of your information is. Almost all the information behind remarks is for the National Weather Service. You can see and scan very quickly here that we've got some clouds up in Portland area. However, it's clear below 12,000 for most of the route. Visibility is unrestricted. And it's daytime, so we're not terribly concerned about the dew point spreads. They look pretty good. And then as we get towards destination, we have some reduced visibilities and IFR conditions. You could actually also see that in the color coding here. So take a look at that. However, if you went to the plain text, if you click this little button here up in the left-hand corner, you're going to get this. It's 10 to 15 times the data. Now you can go here and click and read if you have a question, but really learn how to read that ICAO. Now the graphical forecast for aviation has replaced the area forecast. The area forecast is now gone. The National Weather Service feels pretty confident about this. I'm not quite there yet. I like the idea that we've got a graphical forecast, though. But I don't like what they're doing on 1-800-weatherbrief.com with the graphical forecast. So I would just go to aviationweather.gov. And here it's saying that we've got some weather. Now this is, oh, no, this is just from 1-800-weatherbrief.com. I would recommend that you go, instead of trying to read that, which you may be able to, go to aviationweather.gov, go to tools, go to the graphical forecast for aviation. It's going to give you a lot more information. And here you can see we've got, here's what comes up. We've got ceilings and visibilities. It's going to give you TAFs. It's got clouds, or this thunderstorms, precipitation, thunderstorms, winds, and you can set this little timer here to give you all kinds of information, and it will go from forecast to actually what is happening. Observations and warnings or forecasts. The settings tool you can add in your airports, and then also use this tool. Now here we're looking at what the base of the clouds are. You could also look at the tops there. You might be able to see. And here we're seeing clear, but they're also forecasting mountains along that route. And you can zoom in and zoom out. And then we've got ceilings. Now ceilings, as I said earlier, are broken to overcast layers above an airport. They are AGL. So those are valuable to look at. These are based on MOS bulletins. The MOS is basically an animated TAF that is updated hourly. The TAF has human intervention, the MOS does not. So there are advantages to both. Within 3 hours, the MOS is pretty good, pretty darn good. If you go more than 3 hours out, it's not so good. So what I would do is I would take a look and see what they're forecasting on those with those ceilings. And what you can see here is they've got this little symbol. See this little symbol? I can't really draw very well there. But you see the ceiling, and you can click on weather symbols right down here. Right down here it says weather symbols, and it will bring up what that symbol is. That symbol says smoke. Now the TAFs, as I said, they are for 5 statute miles, and that forecaster is severely limited on what they can forecast. However, it's going to give you the most information. So if you were flying from here down to here, what you would do is you would actually use the en route forecast. The graphical forecast is actually very, very valid. By the way, TAFs, there's only 666 of them across the country. There is over 2,000 MOS bulletins. So do use those MOS bulletins. Still, take a look at what's going on with the en route forecast as a valid part of your briefing. And remember, MOS bulletins are going to be AGL. Graphical forecast is going to be MSL. So when the graphical forecast is going to say your cloud layer bases are going to be at 2,000 feet and you're flying through mountains that go up to 3,000 feet, you're going to be in IFR conditions, right? Now, one of the things they do on 1-800 Weather Brief, because you've got the Next Gen briefing, is it's highlighting what your time is. It's in green because it's VFR. Here it's purple because it's going to be low IFR down here. So it's going to tell you. It's also going to say, and I can't see it, but one of these has it. It's also going to tell you 5 minutes after you depart from that area or 5 minutes before. Oh, here we go. Here you can see 26 minutes before you get to Salem, there's different conditions there. So take a look at that. Now, how do we know? Because as I said, that forecaster is severely limited, and if there's potential thunderstorms in the area, but they're not confident they're going to affect within 5 statute miles, what do? They give you a discussion of what they think. Now, the TAFs are the most accurate of the forecast tool, and what this forecaster thinks is going to happen in their area is very valid. So this is a great tool for you. To get to it, go to aviationweather.gov, go to forecasts, go to aviation forecast discussions. It's usually in plain text. Sometimes I forget that they're using their big words, but look up those words. And what you're going to do is you're going to click on the area that you're flying in, and it's going to bring up that forecast. Usually it's 1 or 2 lines. Sometimes if there's a lot going on, it'll be longer. Here they're saying heavy smoke down around Eugene kept low IFR visibilities at the terminal through much of the morning, thinking once the northerly winds get down to Eugene, visibility should improve to marginal. Watching Corvallis may be an indicator when and if Eugene is going to improve. And so you're getting a really good picture of that. Watch for the time of that. If the MOS bulletins are completely different and the current conditions and the MOS bulletins are in agreement and you're flying shortly and this has not been updated, then I would take a look at that. I would, just use kind of common sense. Here's the winds aloft. Again, I would always compare these to what's going on with the surface and what's on the MOS bulletins. So understanding weather is vital to your health. I have had a passion for it for most of my life. I think it was 87, I lost my 9-year-old nephew due to aviation weather. He was in an aircraft. My daughter was supposed to be there. The aircraft ran into some weather, and I lost him. And so it's understanding weather and what that does has been vital to me. We look at experts like Scott Crossfield, who was at one time the most experienced pilot in the world, who we lost due to weather. I look at Steve Fawcett, renowned aviator. We lost him due to winds on the eastern side of the Sierras, and it was all predictable. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever seen, other than the Delta flight that went down in, I think it was in Dallas. We know how to see weather, how to analyze it. You've got to know what you're looking for, and if you know that, then you can avoid it and you can stay flying safe. So for those of you that don't know, this is my 4-minute word from our sponsor. I am the sponsor of these events. I pay for the webinar host. I pay to have Jennifer on here. I saw Jennifer was able to help a number of you. I do appreciate, Jen, I appreciate you. And David, so this is my 4-minute word from our sponsor, and I'll go to that and I'll come back to your questions. I see several. So when people asked me to put together a training program that was easily understood, I did that. I did that with a course called The Trio. It is an online training program that you can watch time and time again at your own convenience from your home. We keep it online for a couple of reasons. One, because we update it. We're just in the middle of a major update, the biggest one that we've done since we first launched it. Usually we did pretty minor updates with the system. We've had so many major changes and so many new things that I want to share with you that we're in the process of doing all of that. And it takes a lot of time to get these together. I cut one, I recut it, I edit it, something changes and I recut it again before we release it. But we're in the process of doing that. And also because, so you get all of those changes with that. It qualifies for Masters and Advanced Wings credit. Now, for those of you that don't know, there is a Wings program, and what that means is that I think it's every 2 years you have to get a check ride, or you can do continuing education through the Wings program. But you have to have those Masters and Advanced Wings credits to qualify. There's very few courses that offer that. Mine does. And the thing is that once you are Trio program, you can watch these time and time again and get those Wings credits. So most of our pilots watch it quarterly. Some of them watch it to bring up their knowledge or whatever, but we're putting in some really cool things that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. So it's going to cover the vital steps to predicting adverse conditions. You're going to talk about the 3 things you have to know when analyzing radar and the 8 pieces of the puzzle that can save your life. Also, you're going to get a copy of my book. This is book 1 of my 3-book series. It's called Aviation Weather Made Easy, the Pre-Flight Brief. This is the basics of your standard weather brief and what you're going to look at. This came out, I think, 2 years ago and continues to be a bestseller and was an Amazon hot new release. Pilots, we had a pilot that sent us an email a couple weeks ago that they read it. He was a student pilot and he took it to a CFI and said, you need to read this. So I thought that was pretty, but that is included in your brief. Also, you're going to get what I call the weather detection tools. This is a tool that you can use that you can go through and make it a really good evaluation of the weather that you're looking at. It's really going to help you do that. We're also creating an app with it. And the last piece that we're adding is a really cool option that is going to talk about specific areas. Like earlier, I was mentioning the 500 millibar low or trough over California. We're going to go into details about how you look at it. Scott Crossfield and Steve Fawcett, we lost both of them because of specifics in those areas, specific weather that you'd have to know and look for. And so we're going to have areas where you're going to be able to click on that and say, let's say that you're flying up to the Great Lakes area. What do you want to check on? So you can click on that and it will bring that up, or wherever you're flying. Here's our webinar special. It's valid for the next hour. And that is, you're going to get the Trio, the 3 on-demand training videos. The hazard, you're going to get that bonus video. Plus, you're going to get a copy of Aviation Weather Made Easy, the Pre-Flight Brief. That is something we added back in. You guys just said that that's something you really wanted, so we did. Weather detection analysis chart, you're going to get that with it. And the first 5 to purchase are going to get a signed copy of the book. It's a $213 value, and you're going to get it for $129. That price is going to go up when we start releasing the new version, which I'm hoping is this week. I do want to see you there. Oh, let me add this. I forgot to click on this. Hang on a second. Now, if you want to get this, here is where you can get it. And by the way, we very rarely have any of the signed books left. So if that's something you'd like, I would jump on there and send me a little note that you did. Sometimes we have like 3 or 4 people that do it at the same time. And so anyway, we'll just send me a little note. Let's go over the 10 top tips. Then I have a little story, and then we'll wrap it all up. Number 1, take the 5 to 10 minutes. Sit down, take notes, be attentive. 2, be the pilot in command. 3, know the elements of a standard weather brief. 4, have an idea what you may encounter prior to that brief. 5, if you're talking to a briefer, ask questions if you don't understand. 6, if the briefer is going too fast, tell them they work for you. 7, let the briefer know if you're a student pilot. 8, log on to 1-800-WeatherBrief.com to get updates on adverse weather. 9, get a standard weather brief within 2 hours of your flight and an update within 30 minutes. And 10, educate yourself on aviation weather. If you're going to fly, it's the best investment you can make. Got to get their itis. 9 years ago, this Thanksgiving, I got a call from a pilot that haunted me actually for years. I started telling you all about it, and guess what? I don't have any more nightmares about it. In any case, he was flying from Sacramento area over a 7,300-foot pass to the Reno area, it was Thanksgiving Day, which is the busiest briefing day of the year, so he'd probably waited 45 minutes to an hour to get to me. And during that time, he had loaded up his car, driven to the airport, and was now loading up his plane. Turkey was in the oven, had to get there, and so he had my phone there, but he wasn't listening very well. We went through the briefing, so I started through the briefing, and as I'm looking at it, I start seeing something that looks like a developing cell of thunderstorms about 2/3 of the way up the mountain pass. He's going to be at a mountain pass and potentially run into thunderstorms. So I said, it looks to me like you got thunderstorms. Let me check the IR. Oh, yeah. It looks to me like you got a thunderstorm developing right on your route. No response. Sir, did you hear what I just said? Yep, got it, thanks. Put me back on mute. Went on, saw an urgent pilot report for severe turbulence in that area. What happens is you start getting severe up and down drafts, especially on that mountainous terrain. So I tried to get his attention again. Same response. We get to the end of the briefing, and there is a center weather advisory for severe embedded thunderstorms. Now, let me just explain something. Of all the things that I have seen in aviation weather, one of the more gruesome things I've seen on ATC radar is pilots flying into thunderstorms. And what happens is usually they're flying along, they're a little concerned, they're looking at their radar, they're asking what's going on, they're a little tense, and then all of a sudden you'll see them make a turn that didn't quite make a lot of sense, like almost like a U-turn or like a 180. ATC will ask them what happened, they'll sound a little sheepish, and then they drop out of the sky. I've seen 4 of those. One of them was a pilot I'd actually, I don't know that I'd worked him. Maybe I was just analyzing the accident. In any case, he was trying to top out a thunderstorm in Georgia, which in the summertime, which he's just not going to do. We found parts of his plane in 4 states. So I have a lot of attention when somebody's flying into a thunderstorm. So I said, sir, did you really get there is a center weather advisory for severe embedded thunderstorms? And did you hear me? And he was getting upset with me. So I said, all right, well, pilot weather reports are requested, knowing what was going to happen. He should have disconnected, and he didn't. And then I heard him say, all right, kids, in the plane. And I heard these little kids run into the plane cheering. And I said, whoa, 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 wait, sir? And he said, yeah. I said, those your kids? He said, yeah, they're my kids. And I said, do you love them? Because they're probably not going to make it to that turkey dinner. He said, what are you talking about? I said, severe embedded thunderstorms. He said, severe embedded thunderstorms. There's a long pause. Heard a door open. Heard a door close. And then he said, do you think you could start at the top of that briefing? And in about 15 seconds, he decided he was driving. Now, this is how I close out all of my webinars and all of my talks. And why? I'll tell you, I take that hearing those little boys was like a sign to me, but it gets me every time. And it is the only story I have with a happy ending. Only story. So please don't let that be you. I want to thank you for joining me on this Friday morning. I appreciate your time and your interest in aviation weather. If you didn't, please make sure and send us a chat message with your WINGS email on it. Notes and links, you can actually click on the offer, scroll down to the bottom. There are 4 PDFs you should download. Please do download those. There's a lot of stuff on that, but also you're going to get an email with it. CFIs, if you'd like to participate in the program with the interview, we're going to be doing those. And if you've got an area of expertise, let me know. I would love to do that. We're going to do a number of recordings, and I'm really excited about that program as well as doing things. Send me an email, put CFI on the subject line so I know that's you, and we'll go from there. WINGS credits. Again, all you had to do is give us your WINGS credits in the chat box and be here for most of the webinar. Now, here is the FAA safety page. You should be well familiar with it. You should be participating in this program. It's a great program. A lot of great people that have a lot of information donate their time for you. So take advantage of it. If you don't see your WINGS credit, please don't send us an email and say, did I get my WINGS credit? Will I get my WINGS credit? We handle about 1,500 of these a month, and it really bogs down our whole system. We've got 2 persnickety systems. Almost all of them come up with your WINGS credit in about 3 days. So please give it at least 3 to 5 days. And if you do, then log on to your WINGS log on to FAAsafety.gov and look under advanced credits and see if you got them. If after 3 to 5 days, not 2 days, 3 to 5, we had 20 people last week, 2 days, and they're sending us emails. 3 to 5 days, please then log on and see if you've got it. If you don't get it, get the reminder that you got from us and shoot that. That gives us 2 pieces of information: the webinar that you attended and also your email address that we sent the reminders on. And then here is all about the WINGS program. Do go in there, do participate in there. And I'm sure we've got some AMTs here also. There's a great AMT program. So really, really use this game, use this, and it'll be great. All right. We're going to do the Q&A now. All right. Hi, Andrea. Student pilot actually for drones. Oh, not so sure about credits. I don't know about that either, and I'm so glad you were here. Oh, and let's see here. Somebody here wants to get the ebook instead of the hard copy. I know what you mean. I read online also. We'll certainly work that out. Yeah. Hi, Curtis. Great to see you here. I think you're the same Curtis Johnson. Oh, sorry. Don't usually say last names here. Hi, John. You haven't attended before. Well, welcome. I'm so glad you did. Hi, Kevin. Uh, in addition to this program, what else would I need for the WINGS program, which avoids the check rate? Just go in and check the WINGS program, and it will go into details on that. Hi, Joshua. Just bought your book. Would appreciate a signed copy. Awesome. Let's see here. I need the paperback book, the ebooks, and the videos. Oh, Jerry, that's awesome. Well, Jen, I'm sure Jen can help you figure out that. And Brian says ForeFlight uses Duots for weather all the time. Hmm? No, ForeFlight uses their own service. There. Oh, you use Duots all the time. The only one that I recommend for a standard weather briefing is 1-800 Weather Brief in conjunction with aviationweather.gov. But hi, Art. Great seeing you back here. I love what you do for this. Thank you. Question is, you named something like 8 different websites, which is great. Where do these sites get their info from? They all have to get their info from National Weather Service, and it has to be a certified version. In other words, in order to be a legal briefing, where they can call it a legal briefing and the FAA is actually going to recognize it, they have to get it directly from the National Weather Service. And then they put it into their own format, their own graphic designs, et cetera, et cetera. WSI, in my opinion, has the best of the best graphics in the world. I don't think anybody competes with them. ForeFlight does, well, no, I take that back. ForeFlight, I think, right now is doing some of the best graphics in the world. WSI, a very close second. They don't offer the WSI graphics or the ForeFlight graphics on 1-800-weatherbrief.com. However, you can go to some of the other sites and check those out. Also, you can go to, but the other thing that they do is that they put the weather into a usable format. The best of the best is 1-800-weatherbrief.com with a backup of using aviationweather.gov. I never used to send anybody to aviationweather.gov. Let's see here. My guess is that they're all government-owned assets. Do not believe Garmin Pilot is certainly not a government-owned asset. Flightplan.com is not. And let's see here. Let me go through it. Garmin Pilot is not. Flightplan.com is not. I don't believe. And okay, it's 1-800-weatherbrief.com. Garmin Pilot Flight. Duots and 1-800-weatherbrief.com are the only two on the online. The rest are not. Also, do you ever see weather briefs going completely computerized? Seems the private industry is trying to replace the government. Yeah, actually they are. And I mean, 1-800-weatherbrief.com was available before it was subsidized by the government. So yeah, and a lot of these guys, ForeFlight is a paid for service that is doing an awesome job, I think. Hi, David. Are VADWinds available in the ADS-B in DataStream? No, they're not. You have to specifically go with that. I think they're such a valuable tool. I'd love to see that, though. Hi, William. Your first webinar. Cool. Hi, Simon. This is so helpful. We aren't even finished. Oh, good. That was a while ago. I know. And Jack says, these are so helpful. I had a first cousin to fly into a thunderstorm in 1987, Louisiana, which was fatal. Wow. got a chance to read the FAA investigation and don't want to do the same. Yeah, and Jack, if you fly down in the southern portion, that's why we're specifically. That's what happened to Scott Crossfield. He looked at the weather at 8 a.m. He was flying at 10:30, and I'll tell you what, there was a any time in Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, southeastern portion of the country where you have that warm, moist air coming off from the Gulf or off from the Atlantic. You've got those mountains there, and what you want to really watch for is you want to know if you have any kind of low, any kind of frontal system by about 10:30, you're going to have an explosion of thunderstorms that probably is going to be unpassable by anything but the highest flying jumbo jets. And hi, Paul, can you comment on the MOS bulletins? I think they're great. I think I covered most of that. There's 2,200 of them across the country. They're not the easiest thing to decipher. The couple of places that you're going to be able to decipher them is if you go to the MOS bulletins under ceilings, or if you have ForeFlight. ForeFlight will bring it up along with the TAFs. They're heavily coded when you're in aviationweather.gov and almost unusable. I do talk about them in, I think it's book 3 of my 3-book series, but I'm actually just going to recommend it. It's so complex. I mean, even I was looking at it and going, oh, you have a visibility of 6. No, what that means is it's a code of 6, which means you have to go and look what that code means. And you have to look at the entire state and decide which one of these little podunk AWAS ASOSs is the one that you're looking for. So it's not the easiest thing. If it comes down to a toss-up, you've got a MOS bulletin and a TAF there. I usually will take the TAF over the MOS bulletin. However, if the TAF is old and the weather has been changing and the currents are more in alignment with what's going on the MOS, then I would go with that. Hi, Linda. Is there a free app site that will graphically show various cloud layers so I can pick a good altitude to fly between layers? I found the Aerovi app. Oh, cool. That does this, but it costs that must be pulling their info from some official weather source, but and they're all taking it from the National Weather Service and probably taking it off from the SKU-T charts. I haven't had anybody ask me about SKU-Ts lately. SKU-T charts are charts when they send up the 00 and 12 Zulu balloons. And what they do is they call them skew because it's skewed off to the side, and T because they're talking about temperature, although it does a lot more than temperature. It measures the temperature and dew point spread. When the temperature and dew point spread is together, you got clouds. Where it goes apart, you don't. It also tells you where there's instability in that atmosphere. So that's usually what they're using to say where this cloud will start. But just remember, it's only done at 00 and 12 Zulu, right? So there's a long time between those, and things can change. So that is probably what they're looking at. That's basically what they use to get the feedback on the graphical forecast. You can look at tops, but the area forecast used to break it down and say a little more than that. They kind of stopped doing that last couple of years. Tops reports you could get from the graphical forecast clicking tops, but layers is a little more complex. I think you're going to have to know how to read those. Henry says, and let me finish that last one. I think you're going to have to learn how to read the SKU-Ts, Linda. Hi, Henry. Isn't satellite delayed too? No, it's not. And you can look at the time that it's on, and it's actually the time that it is the time that it's rolling, from everything that I know and have seen. But the radar actually has about a 20-minute delay, 10 to 20. Okay. And let's see here. Brian says, ForeFlight, which I use all the time, is legal because it's connected with DUATS. Well, it wouldn't have anything to that it's connected with DUATS necessarily. It might be using the DUATS system to file your flight plan, which it may be doing. However, the weather brief portion, it would be more that it's, is it bringing up a DUATS briefing? Is that what it's doing? but it's got the next gen briefing. That's why I like it. Raymond says QTs are soundings from the GOES satellite. No, they're from the balloon launches. Hi, Joshua. I've used the app called Windy. It's Windy Tie, right? Windy Tie. That I found very useful for clouds and winds. Not sure how official it is, though. It's not, but it's cool. Hi, Kevin. Lynn Jim Odoms got me flying before he passed away years ago. He investigated accidents in the DC area. Hopefully you know this great man. I don't. I will be getting your program. Oh, cool. Well, we'll make sure you get a signed copy of the book. Hi, Jerry. I'm also flying, learning to fly gliders. That's one of my want tos. I find weather the most challenging. In fact, I was thinking that I need to go to college for weather. The problem with going to college for weather is that they end up getting far more complex and you need to know what you can do very quickly. Hi, Patrick. Can MOS be used for filing IFR to an airport without weather forecasting? Are you saying can you use a MOS? You can't file on a MOS bulletin, but I think what you're saying is if you saw IFR being reported on a MOS or forecast on a MOS bulletin, would you go ahead and file an IFR flight plan? Yeah, I would. Hi, Simon. Thank you. Hi, Francesco. First time webinar. I loved it. Thank you. Ciao. Ciao. Hi, Kevin. Great webinar. I hope you'll consider doing one that's ForeFlight specific. I don't narrow down. However, we are going to go more into ForeFlight. I couldn't find I tried to add that here last night and wasn't able to add that. Hi, Art. We use WSI for the airlines. It is the best. I know. I love it. Hi, Joshua. Fantastic webinar. I've been with Wings program since I was a student pilot, and this is the best training I've ever had. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. I plan to use 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF from now on. I think it's a great one. And I see several of you asking for signed copies. We will make sure that you get signed copies. John, Joshua, Terrence, thank you. Hi, Brian. Do you think the FAA can do a better job of describing compliance with 91.103? Do you find it odd that there is no AC 91.103? I think things are changing so rapidly, and I think they're finding their feet with what the changes in the system are. They don't want to enact things when they're changing so rapidly, when they're trying to figure out what the safest way for pilots to get briefing. They kind of just launched into supporting online briefings not so long ago. So I think it's really a data gathering phase before they make any decisions. But yes, I look for requirements. I read the requirements. I try to determine which ones are actually requirements, and it's a little exciting. The talking with the head of the flight service program was the one that was really enlightening, where she said, I think everything's online and pilots should be able to do that. So there you go. I think we will, but I think right now it's so in influx that Jen says we are way over 5 copies. Yes, we are, but if you, we'll make sure that you get a signed copy anyway. Well, at least we'll do that for the next, let's do that for the next 20 minutes, Jen. Hi, Patrick. I'm just going to take a couple more questions. I do like to take all the questions, but we've got so many. You guys are really great. Let's see here, Brian. I cannot find the top of your question, but I saw the bottom part of it. It says instead, oh, Patrick, instead of an area forecast. I'm not sure what that was about. Unfortunately, there was probably like 20 new questions in there. Is the weather briefing in Mexico and Canada the same as we use in the US? No, but I can tell you that they used 1-800-weatherbrief.com used Nav Canada, which I think is great, to try and put it together. Canada has a pretty good system. Mexico, eh. I can see now that ForeFlight, let's see, okay. Oh, Brian says I can see now that ForeFlight just uses DUATS for flight plans, not weather. Just like you said, their own weather. Yeah. Hi, Shahir. What are the new changes to the flight service compared with Lockheed when it was in charge? I haven't seen any, and everybody that I know that Sarah says there's not many. The one thing is they were on a rapid change with 1-800 Weather Brief, and they were very, very, very responsive with making any changes that anybody was sending in when they first right before Lidos. I haven't seen that responsiveness, unfortunately. Same people, but they're kind of sticking with what they got. One last thing, we've got, let's see, next week, I think we're doing something really special. Instead of, we do have that I'm going to be doing a Q&A, but instead we are going to have Sam Boesfield, who has invented the first flying car. It's going to be doing its first flight very soon, and we got a great interview that you're going to get. And he's going to answer some of your questions. I actually am going to get one of these. It's called a Samson Switchblade. It is the hottest looking thing I've ever seen, and it's one of I'm so excited about this. I think it's going to change aviation. Most of the flying cars are designed to drive down your private driveway, down your private road to your private strip and take off. This is actually designed to drive on the roads, and it's a flying sports car. It outperforms the Jaguar XJ. It's a three-wheeler. It is just, oh gosh, it is just a hot looking vehicle, and it also moves like crazy. And airborne, let's see, they did over 100 wind tunnel tests just because the wind tunnel people were kind of blown away by what it was doing. So it's extremely aerodynamic. It was featured on Smithsonian, and Sam's going to come here next Wednesday and share with us what's going on. You're going to get a chance to see some of the videos. So I'm really excited about that. And we're going to sign off. I want to thank you all. I hope I answered all your questions. We had a lot of questions come in today, so but I do appreciate your time and interest. We'll see you all later. Bye-bye.